Something shifted in the architecture of this war on Wednesday night, and it did not happen gradually. It happened in a single salvo. Iranian missiles struck the most critical military installation on Israel's northern frontier, the command headquarters inside the city of Saft, the nerve center through which every troop rotation, every artillery authorization, every defensive coordinate flowing toward southern Lebanon passes. This was not a symbolic strike. This was a surgical hit on the brain of Israel's northern military operation. In the same wave, missiles landed on Tel Aviv, Ben Gurion's surrounding zone, and Kiryat Shmona. Simultaneously, Iran claimed its missiles reached 4 American military installations spread across 3 separate countries. This was Wave 80 of what Iran has designated Operation True Promise 4, and what it revealed about the trajectory of this conflict is something no official statement from any podium has come close to acknowledging. To understand why the safe strike matters beyond the immediate destruction, you have to understand what that base does on an ordinary Tuesday. On March 17th, Israel launched a renewed ground incursion into southern Lebanon. Every operational decision flowing out of that ground campaign, the armored movements on the Golan Heights, the territorial defense rotations stationed directly on the Lebanese border, the coordination between 2 frontline combat divisions actively engaged in Lebanese territory. All of it runs through that single headquarters. When Iranian military officials described it as the facility commanding and deploying forces along Israel's northern borders, they were not inflating its importance for propaganda purposes. They were reading from the operational manual, and then they put ballistic missiles into it. The political dimension compounds the military one in ways that make this moment particularly volatile. Israel's defense minister publicly stated the intention to hold a security zone extending all the way to the Litani River until Hezbollah is eliminated as a fighting force. The finance minister went further, calling for the Litani to become Israel's permanent northern border. These are not defensive postures articulated under pressure. These are territorial ambitions announced in the middle of an active multi-front war. Iran's response was to strike the command center administering that expansion. This is no longer a conflict with a single axis of pressure. Iran is pressing from the east with ballistic missiles. Hezbollah is launching rockets from the north with air raid sirens running continuously across Israel's northern communities. At least 1 woman has already been killed in those northern rocket attacks. Gaza remains an open wound in the south. 3 fronts are simultaneously active, and the command infrastructure managing the most dangerous of them just absorbed direct fire. Before going further into what this means strategically, the weapons themselves demand precise examination because the headlines consistently misrepresent what these missiles are and what they are capable of doing. The Sejjil is a 2-stage solid-fuel intermediate-range ballistic missile. It runs approximately 17.5 meters in length, weighs close to 23 tons at launch, and delivers a warhead payload ranging between 500 kilograms and 1 metric ton. Its operational range extends from 2,000 to 2,500 kilometers. Iranian officials claim it can travel from the city of Natanz to Tel Aviv in under 7 minutes. The detail that makes that claim militarily significant is not the speed, it is the propulsion system. Solid fuel does not require extended fueling procedures on an open launch pad. Liquid fuel systems need that preparation window, and satellite surveillance can detect it, giving adversaries time to consider preemptive action. The Sejjil needs almost no such window. It fires from road mobile launchers with preparation time measured in minutes, climbs on a steep ballistic arc, exits the atmosphere, and re-enters at hypersonic velocity. That terminal re-entry profile is extraordinarily difficult for ground-based defense networks to engage effectively. The K-Bar Shekan, in its most advanced current variant, is a different weapon system with a diretegic function. It is liquid-fueled, running roughly 13 meters for the motor section with an additional 4 meters for the warhead assembly, and its launch weight sits between 19,000 and 26,000 kilograms. It carries the heaviest confirmed payload in Iran's active arsenal, between 1,500 and 1,800 kilograms. The engine powering it runs on hypergolic fuel, a propellant combination that can remain stable in storage for years without degradation, cutting launch preparation to approximately 12 minutes. It also incorporates a mid-course navigation correction system that operates outside the atmosphere, which is the critical detail. electronic warfare jamming, the technology Israel and the United States deploy to corrupt missile guidance during terminal descent, does not work against a system that corrects its trajectory before re-entering the jamming envelope. By the time the missile is close enough to jam, it has already made its final navigational adjustments in space. But the single capability that has fundamentally restructured the logic of this air defense battle is not the range, not the speed, and not the navigation system. It is what the K-bar Shekan carries inside its warhead section. The missile can be configured with a cluster munition payload containing up to 80 individual submunitions. Each of those bomblets carries between 2 and 5 kilograms of explosives, and that one design feature has broken the foundational assumption on which Israel's layered air defense network was built. The assumption was simple and had held for decades: track the missile on its way up, intercept it on its way down, neutralize the threat. The cluster warhead makes that assumption obsolete, and the mechanism is brutally straightforward. As the missile descends toward its target, the warhead section separates and disperses its submunitions at an altitude of approximately 7 to 10 kilometers. From that moment forward, there is no single target to intercept. There are dozens of small, fast-falling objects scattered across miles of airspace, each one individually too small and too numerous for any existing system to reliably engage. The former director of Israel's Ballistic Missile Defense Organization stated this problem with clinical precision. Once the cluster opens, it is already too late. Israel's Arrow system, designed for exo-atmospheric and high-altitude interception, must destroy the incoming missile before it crosses that 7-kilometer threshold. If the Arrow scores a hit but fails to achieve a direct destructive kill of the warhead section, the submunitions can still deploy even from a damaged or partially destroyed missile body. Iron Dome, the system the international press mentions most frequently when discussing Israeli air defense, was engineered for an entirely different threat profile. It handles short-range rockets at lower altitudes with a different radar and interceptor configuration. It was never designed to engage dozens of small hypersonic submunitions dispersing simultaneously across a wide area. The Israeli Air Force has now openly acknowledged making a deliberate operational decision to withhold interception attempts against certain cluster bomblet salvos in order to conserve its inventory of short-range interceptors. That acknowledgement is extraordinary. It means Israel is consciously choosing to let some Iranian munitions reach their targets because the cost of intercepting them exceeds the strategic value of doing so. That cost calculation is where the financial architecture of this war becomes as alarming as the military one. A single Iranian ballistic missile costs somewhere between $200,000 and $500,000 to manufacture and field. A single Arrow 3 interceptor costs between $2 and $3 million. A single THAAD interceptor costs $12.7 million. During a concentrated 12-day engagement period in June of the previous year, the United States expended an estimated 150 THAAD rounds. The total cost of that expenditure alone exceeded $1.9 billion and consumed approximately 14% of the entire American THAAD stockpile in less than 2 weeks. The current conflict has now run for more than double that duration across 80 separate attack waves. The narrative that has been consistently offered by officials on both sides of the Atlantic is that Iran's missile launch capacity has been meaningfully degraded by American and Israeli strikes on Iranian territory. Senior officials have stated that launch infrastructure was damaged, that production facilities were hit, that Iran's ability to sustain this tempo was being systematically reduced. The actual operational record of the last 26 days does not support that narrative in any measurable way. The Iranian military has executed 80 separate attack waves across 26 days. That is an average exceeding 3 waves per day, sustained continuously. The introduction of the Zulfikar solid fuel missile in waves 76 and 77, followed by the continued deployment of the Sejjil in wave 80, reflects a deliberate doctrinal shift, a pivot toward road-mobile, solid propellant systems that require no fixed infrastructure, operate from small mobile convoys, and leave almost no detectable signature for satellite reconnaissance to identify in advance. Iran is not running out of missiles. It is transitioning to platforms that are structurally harder to find, harder to target, and faster to launch than the systems it was using 30 days ago. The Israeli military's own confirmed data tells a version of this story that the official commentary consistently underplays. As of March 20th, 365 ballistic missiles had been tracked crossing toward Israeli territory since February 28th. Of those, 285 entered Israeli airspace. Approximately 270 were intercepted, producing an overall interception rate exceeding 90%. That number, when presented in isolation, sounds like a functioning defense. When placed alongside what the remaining 10% achieved, it tells a different story entirely. More than 24 confirmed cluster warhead strikes impacted populated areas. Over 100 separate impact sites were recorded. 2 construction workers were killed in Yehud. 2 elderly residents were killed in Ramat Gan. 6 people died in a single missile strike in Beit Shemesh on the 1st of March, one of the deadliest single attacks against Israeli civilians recorded in this conflict. Nearly 200 people were wounded in a single coordinated attack on 2 population centers on March 22nd after air defense systems failed to intercept at least 2 incoming missiles. A 90% interception rate against 365 missiles means approximately 36 missiles reached their targets. 36 missiles with cluster warheads, each scattering dozens of submunitions, produce not 36 impact events, they produce hundreds. Then there is the dimension that no military briefing has addressed directly, but that the global commodity markets have been pricing in real time since the first week of March. Before this conflict escalated past its current threshold, Brent crude traded at approximately $72 to $87 per barrel. It has been oscillating between $100 and $110 through the middle weeks of the conflict, spiking near 120 in the earliest phase. Dubai crude reached an all-time recorded high above $150. Omani crude settled above 152. Commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz has been severely disrupted since early March across a transit route that carries roughly 1/5 of all global oil and liquefied natural gas flows. The International Energy Agency formally characterized this as the largest supply disruption in the recorded history of the global oil market. Gulf production has fallen by at least 10 million barrels per day. The IEA authorized the release of 400 million barrels from emergency strategic reserves, the largest such release in the agency's history. The United States committed 172 million barrels from its strategic petroleum reserve. Oil prices have continued rising regardless. The agricultural dimension is receiving almost no coverage relative to its eventual impact. Analysts tracking fertilizer markets have indicated that urea and nitrogen-based fertilizer prices could roughly double if Hormuz disruption continues at its current level. The strait is a critical transit corridor for a significant share of global fertilizer trade. Brazil, which accounts for nearly 60% of global soybean exports, depends on fertilizer shipments that move through Hormuz. When that supply chain constricts, the downstream effect does not appear in the war coverage. It appears months later in food prices in countries that have no direct connection to the conflict and no political mechanism for understanding why their grocery costs have risen. On the same Wednesday that Wave 80 struck SAFE and 4 American military installations across 3 countries, the President of the United States told reporters that Iran was totally defeated and militarily dead. He stated that American aircraft were operating freely over Tehran and that Iran was incapable of meaningful response. The statement was made in the morning. By evening, ballistic missiles were impacting Israeli cities and American bases. The Iranian military's official spokesperson responded on camera with a statement that did not require military analysis to parse. The strategic power you claim has become a strategic defeat, and if escape were possible, it would already have happened. The 26-day gap between what is being declared at official podiums and what is physically landing on the ground is not narrowing. It is widening with each successive wave. The interceptor economics deserve one final, unambiguous articulation because this is the variable that no amount of political rhetoric can override. Iran spends between $200,000 and $500,000 to manufacture and launch one ballistic missile. Israel spends between $2 and $3 million to intercept it with an arrow round and up to $12.7 million to intercept it with a THAAD round. At the current rate of exchange, Iran can sustain this campaign economically in ways that the defense budgets on the other side cannot indefinitely match. THAAD interceptors are not consumer goods with flexible production schedules. They are precision manufactured systems with limited production capacity, and the Pentagon is only now beginning to move toward expanding output, a process measured in years, not months. The stockpiles being consumed in this conflict took years to accumulate. They are being expended at a rate that no production expansion currently underway can replenish on a timeline relevant to this war. Israel's daily defense expenditure has been estimated at up to $200 million. Multiply that across 26 days, and the figure approaches $5 billion in defense spending for a single month of this conflict, before accounting for infrastructure damage, civilian displacement, or the economic contraction driven by 3 active fronts simultaneously disrupting normal commercial and industrial activity. California gasoline has crossed $5 per gallon. Global fertilizer markets are beginning to move. Shipping insurance premiums for Hormuz transit have reached levels that are making certain commercial routes economically inviable, regardless of whether physical attacks occur. The war is not contained within the geographic boundaries where the missiles are landing. 80 waves, 26 days, 365 ballistic missiles confirmed by the Israeli military's own accounting. A command headquarters responsible for Israel's entire northern military operations struck directly. Solid fuel road mobile missiles that leave no detectable launch preparation window. Cluster warheads that scatter faster than any existing defense architecture can process. Interceptors being consumed years faster than they can be manufactured. An adversary that responded to being declared militarily dead by launching its 80th attack wave hours later. The question this conflict is forcing the world toward is not the one being debated in press conferences or parliamentary sessions. The question is structural and mathematical. What happens when the side spending $3 million per interception exhausts its interceptor inventory before the side spending $300,000 per missile exhausts its missile inventory? That is not a rhetorical question. It is an engineering constraint. And on the current trajectory, it will produce an answer whether the world is prepared for it or not.